And right now, students across the country are paying the price for this administration's assault on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Programs are gutted, scholarships pulled, cultural centers are shuttered, students questioning whether they belong on their own campuses, and feeling that same chill in their communities back home. These aren't abstract policy debates. These are young people's lives. So people, please welcome our APIAVote Youth Ambassador and current intern, Mahzabeen Choudhury from the University of Florida. And as a fun fact, University of Florida has been part of our ambassador program from the very inception back in 2016. So welcome, come on up.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Mahzabeen Choudhury. I'm a proud daughter of Bangladeshi immigrants and a first-generation student studying journalism and political science at the University of Florida. On April 3rd, I made history at UF. Well, what do I mean by that? See this mural? This mural was created by UF artists from our very own API community. It captured decades of Asian and Asian American history. From the first ever recorded Asian graduates at UF in 1944 to the 2001 protest against a racist Vietnam war-themed fraternity party. The mural captured decades of struggle and pride, all on one wall. With that mural was a third space. A third space is a community gathering environment, separate from your home and your school or work. It's the place in between where you exhale, where you find your people, where you get to just exist. The Asian Pacific Islander Desi Student Engagement Affairs Office was just that for API students at UF. I recall the multiple instances I had of upperclassmen who told me how the mural was the first thing to greet you when you walked in. It was a reminder of what students had fought for and everything that space had meant. Yet, I never got to experience that. As I entered a new chapter of my academic career in the summer of 2024, I was a part of the first cohort of students to enter UF under the Anti-Diversity, Equity, and Inclusivity era, more commonly known as Anti-DEI. When I joined the board of the Asian American Student Union, or ASU, during my freshman year as multimedia chair, I quickly learned I had entered a community that was grieving something that I would never get to experience. And about that mural, my first time seeing this mural wasn't on a wall. It was hidden and kept away from us, collecting dust in a closet, labeled a DEI object. As I navigated my first year at UF, I always found myself gravitating towards API-related spaces and work, because for me, that meant something specific. It meant finding and cultivating representation. It meant sharing culture with each other, learning from the past, and figuring out how to apply it to the now. But the most meaningful part? The joy. Joining ASU's board gave me my first real friendships at UF, my home away from home, and a deeper love for API advocacy and representation more than I could have ever expected. By the end of my freshman year, I knew I had found my place. And I knew I wanted to be a part of that rich cultural legacy, not just to inherit it, but to add to it. And I did, 2 years later. Because on April 3rd, 2026, I became the first South Asian woman to become president of the Asian American Student Union in its 34-year history. Overseeing 10 unique sub-organizations and programs, over 15 affiliates, and a mission that has never wavered: to cultivate a home away from home, empower our student body, and amplify Asian American voices. 34 years, and I'm the first. But that's not just my story. In fact, My story begins through a reflection of the past. What do you notice in this picture? How does it make you feel? This is the APIAVote office I talked about earlier. 10 years ago, this room celebrated its grand opening in the heart of UF's campus. For the API students who had it, it was a beloved space that provided a home for those who had nowhere to call their true home. But today, it is known as room 2215. When we talk about anti-DEI legislation, there's talks about the executive orders, the corporate rollbacks, and even the political battles and legislators. But something that rarely gets noticed, the students who are living through the erasure of their community's history. The ones who walk past room 2215 and see nothing where something used to be. This isn't a complex issue, it's personal, because this is the human cost of anti-DEI. But to understand how we got here, let me take you back to where it all began. Pop quiz! Which was the first school in the Southeast to establish the Asian American Studies Certificate and Minor? Ding, 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 ding! Of course, it's University of Florida. But despite UF establishing themselves as the first in 2004, we have to remember who actually fought for this curriculum to exist. And that was the countless of faculty, staff, students who are part of the Asian American community at the university. Because a course can teach you history, but it can't hold you when you're homesick, or introduce you to the person who becomes your best friend, or make you feel like this campus was built for you too. So the same people who fought for that curriculum faced their next battle, fighting for a place where all of that was possible. That, however, took time. In fact, the Asian Pacific Islander Desi Student Engagement Affairs Office wasn't always known as APIAVote. Before we even had a space in the heart of campus, our students would gather in a small room in Peabody Hall, known as the API Resource Room, alongside an office called the API Affairs in 2010. My point? Even having nothing, no dedicated space, no physical institutional recognition, did not stop students from hosting events and meeting to advocate for our community. Though the progress we made was gradual, it was persistent until it built something real. As UF stood for a beacon of Asian American advocacy in the South, other campuses started to look to us for guidance. Former staff from the API Affairs went as far as traveling to Louisiana to share the accomplishments the office had achieved. And one thing was clear: we were the blueprint. And those efforts had finally earned us a populated and accessible space on campus. But then, Florida Senate Bill 266 had passed in May 2023. For those unfamiliar, Senate Bill 266 effectively banned the funding of all DEI initiatives at Florida's public universities. In one bill, it dismantled programs, defunded offices, and forced staff out of roles that they had built careers around. It didn't just change policy. It changed the culture of what it felt like to be a part of a minority community on a Florida campus. At the University of Florida, the human cost was immediate and tangible. Nearly 500 active courses were removed from the catalog. That's a student who can no longer see themselves in the curriculum. Our API Early Arrival Transition Program for incoming freshmen, designed to help first-year students adjust to college life and find community before the semester even begins, lost its funding. Our annual Asian American Student Assembly, a campus-wide celebration of API culture, identity, and community that welcomes over 4,000 students, all of different backgrounds, was stripped of its funding. Well-respected staff, mentors who had dedicated their years to our community were forced out of their departments overnight. With those mentors gone, when those programs vanish, and when courses disappear, many other things begin to fade away too. Like the moment a student realizes that they have a political identity. The moment they learn that their history matters. The moment they understand that being an API isn't just a background detail, it's something worth organizing around. SB 266 didn't just defund programs. It interrupted a pipeline of cultural and political awakening that our community spent 3 decades building, including APIAVote. Hearing the way people spoke about APIAVote, including my board, students, and even faculty, led me to believe that this space was no longer a place that we could access. I mean, can you blame me? I was a freshman. It was all that I was told. That assumption in itself is the human cost of erasure trickling in. Because you don't have to lock the door. You just have to make people believe that it's closed. So towards the end of my freshman year, our board had faced a choice. UF had eliminated DEI funding. The programs our community depended on were disappearing, and we had to figure out what to do about it. We fought for the Roots Bill, a piece of student government legislation that gave them the power to finance multicultural programs after UF had eliminated DEI funding. And I want to be honest about what that meant. Before COVID, organizations like ASU had budget autonomy, a lump sum of what we could allocate towards our own programming based on our community's needs. But after, we lost that. So instead of controlling our own budget, maybe around $100,000 per year, we now request funding program by program, application by application, and approval by approval. And Roots just wasn't something that we wanted. It was the best outcome that we could fight for. You could call it a Band-Aid solution, temporary, imperfect, and built on a system that required us to seek recognition and validation from the spaces that weren't built for us. To have the final say over our own community's programming taken out of our hands. In some capacity, we were grateful. And in others, we were exhausted by it. Because here's the reality of fighting for your community inside of a bureaucracy that doesn't fully see you. One wrong word, one misunderstood amendment, one administrative pushback. Any progress we made could have been pushed back to square one. It wasn't until my second year in ASU and serving as archivist that I understood that the change had never been really about physical access. The tables, the whiteboards, the couches, they were all still there. But without its name and institutional recognition, newer students had assumed that the room was no longer existing for them. And honestly, I almost let myself believe that too. Like, okay, freshman year's over, I did the fun, cultural things, I found my friends, I told myself it was time to focus on getting a J-O-B. Suddenly, my involvement in ASU was fading before my very own eyes. But one experience changed everything. APIAVote's Norman Weinmeta University Summit. Last October, our 2 APIAVote student ambassadors, alongside 6 board members of ASU, including myself, were flown out to Houston to attend. We sat in rooms asking questions that I had never been given the space to ask before. What does it mean to be nonpartisan, but still political in a climate like this? How do we navigate difficult conversations without losing people? Where do we come from? And where do we go from here? We learned how to spot misinformation before it spreads through our communities. We traced the history of student organizing and saw ourselves in it. And in between all that, we designed custom Pokemon cards that reflected our identities and power-ups. What were my power-ups? Yapping and tabling non-stop. Because no matter the weather or the situation, I was not stopping until the mission was heard. These were small tokens, but they carried a big truth. You're not just a student, you're a force. For the first time, I wasn't carrying the weight of everything that we had lost. I was being shown what we can be capable of. After all, If students like me did nothing, everything that we built before us will collapse. The certificates, the programs, the community, none of it sustains itself. It is our job to protect what was created, because if we don't do it, no one will. That summit didn't just change how I thought about advocacy, it changed what I believed I was capable of. That revelation motivated me to run as president in spring of 2026. Through the ambassador program APIAVote provided for our board, we earned a $1,500 stipend that went directly into programming that, under UF's DEI restrictions, couldn't have been funded any other way. I left Houston with something I didn't have before: a blueprint and networking supporting our advocacy. So once we landed back in Florida, ASU was fired up. And we started with what was originally ours: reclaiming room 2215. Through our initiative, ASU and Chill, we turned advocacy into something students actually wanted to show up for: raising funds for those affected by SNAP cuts, sewing reusable menstrual pads for communities in need, hosting voter education events, and even traveling to DeLand, Florida, to learn about Luke M. Gong, the citrus wizard, a man whose contributions to the Florida orange industry that were nearly erased from history. Sound familiar? This is what change looks like. This is what it looks like to invest in students. And now we're here. 3 years in, the innocent freshman who joined this board on a whim is now the co-president of ASU, student ambassador for APIAVote, and this summer, one of their communications interns. But the story isn't over just yet. Remember when I told you this room was known as room 2215? Well, I lied. About a week and a half ago, that room was renamed the Collegiate Veteran Success Center. Without notifying my board, UF staff have removed everything, maybe 10 over 15 years of history, gone in just a few days. And here's what I want you to understand. This isn't the end of erasure. This is the erasure continuing. What started with SB 266, the funded program, the reassigned staff, the courses pulled from the catalog, it didn't stop there. It kept going. It still is going, spreading across our nation piece by piece. The Collegiate Veteran Success Center is just the latest proof. Yet, in the midst of all of this is my truth. Finding that mural in that closet didn't want to make me leave. It made me want to fight. Watching programs disappear didn't make me disengage. It made me run for president. And having support like APIAVote in our corner showed me what's possible when students are actually supported. So I'll leave you with this. When I go back to UF this fall, I'm not walking past that door just to feel nothing. I'm going back to make sure every student who joins the Asian American Student Union know the history of what stood there. Because if we don't tell our own story, no one will. I've watched AAPI students drive hours attending organizing summits, legislating in our student government to protect our community and educate our community on voting to make sure our voices continue to be heard, all in the same semester that their own community was being defunded. And that's resilience. And so I ask, in this vacuum that anti-DEI laws have been created, invest in students. Invest in their campus initiatives. Help them amplify their voices. Because when students are resourced, supported, and seen, showing up isn't just possible. It's unstoppable. The question is, what will you do about it? Thank you.